The moment the sheriff stepped onto my back porch with a beer in one hand and a plate of ribs in the other, I knew we were in for a good night. My name's Preston Garrison. I'm a custom woodworker, built my own cabin up in the pines just outside our HOA-run neighborhood, Pinebrook Ridge. Technically, I'm part of the community, but my cabin sits right on the edge of the HOA's jurisdiction line, barely in, which has been a sore spot for the HOA board ever since I built it. They tried to fight the permit 5 years ago and lost. I've been on their radar ever since. Especially with Deborah. Deborah Alcott is your typical HOA Karen mid-50s, bleach blonde bob, always clutching her faux leather clipboard like it's a badge of honor. She's the president of the HOA and treats the neighborhood like her personal kingdom. Everyone knows not to cross her if they don't want a surprise citation for excessively decorative lawn gnomes or unauthorized wind chimes. So when I volunteered to host Sheriff Dwayne's retirement party, I knew I was poking the bear. But after 35 years of service, Dwayne deserved a real send-off, and my cabin was perfect. Private, plenty of space, and no curfew. I even got special clearance from the county for the guest parking just to be safe. By 6, the place was buzzing. Deputies, off-duty officers, Dwayne's family, even the mayor showed up. We had brisket, a bonfire, and a live bluegrass band. Everyone was laughing, telling stories, raising a glass to the man of the hour. And then, like a bad cold front, she arrived. Deborah stomped up my driveway in kitten heels, arms flailing like she'd just discovered a crime scene. Her eyes locked on me like I'd committed treason. "Preston, this is a violation, noise ordinances, unauthorized gathering." "No permit for that band." I leaned against the railing, sipping my beer. "Evening, Deborah, you're about 2 hours late to the party." She squinted at the crowd, then narrowed her eyes at the sheriff, who was mid-toast. "You can't throw unauthorized events in Pinebrook Ridge." "I'm calling the police." From the porch, Sheriff Dwayne raised his glass. "Deborah, I am the police, leased for another hour." She didn't flinch. "Then I'll call someone above you," he chuckled. "I'd love to meet him. I've got the county commissioner here and 2 state troopers." "Want me to introduce you?" Deborah's eye twitched. She spun around, stormed down the driveway, and whipped out her phone as she walked. I figured that'd be the end of it. Dwayne laughed it off. Folks went back to their ribs and bourbon, and the music picked up again. But 20 minutes later, 2 sheriff patrol vehicles pulled up, lights flashing. "Guess she found someone," I muttered to myself. Deputy Kyle, a kid I'd known since he was in diapers, stepped out of the cruiser and looked embarrassed. He walked up slowly, hat in hand. Mr. Garrison." "We got a call about an illegal gathering. Noise complaints, supposed code violations." Dwayne stood up and clapped Kyle on the back. "You're interrupting my party." "What?" Deborah finally got tired of yelling at garden hoses and decided to escalate. Kyle looked from Dwayne to me, then back to his partner, who was trying not to laugh. "She told dispatch there was an out-of-control party happening in the woods. Said people were intoxicated, possibly armed." Dwayne raised an eyebrow. "You mean a bunch of retired law enforcement having a barbecue?" Kyle nodded. "Yeah, dispatch flagged it halfway through the call. We came out just to make sure." That's when I saw Deborah standing at the edge of the tree line, watching like a hawk. When she realized the deputies weren't arresting anyone, she marched back up the driveway. "This is unacceptable. I demand you shut this down." Dwayne turned toward her. "Deborah, did you just make a false report to emergency services?" She blinked. "I made a report about a potential threat. You told them there were armed individuals behaving dangerously. That's a serious accusation," she stammered. "Well, there are weapons. That man over there that's a holstered sidearm. He's a retired detective." Kyle stepped forward, voice low. "Ma'am, filing a false emergency report is a crime." Deborah's voice rose. "I'm the president of this HOA. I have authority." "You don't have legal authority to lie to dispatch," Kyle said flatly. The crowd went silent. Dwayne crossed his arms. "Deputy, I suggest you take her statement. And maybe have her sit in the cruiser while you do it." Deborah's face turned a shade of red I didn't think was medically safe. "You can't do this to me. I run Pinebrook Ridge." "Not tonight, you don't," I said. "Tonight, this is my cabin. And this is Sheriff Dwayne's party." As Kyle gently guided her toward the cruiser, she shrieked, You'll regret this, Preston. I'll have your cabin condemned. Dwayne raised his drink. Good luck with that. I signed off on the final inspection. And just like that, Deborah Alcott, president of the HOA, Queen of Citations, was placed in the back of a patrol car at the sheriff's retirement party. I didn't think the night could get better, but it did. The next morning, the smell of hickory smoke still lingered in the air as I hosed down the last of the ash from the fire pit. The party had gone later than expected, but no one had been rowdy. Everyone left with a full stomach and a warm handshake for the sheriff. Aside from Deborah's little meltdown, it had been perfect. I was halfway through stacking the leftover firewood when I heard gravel crunching under slow tires. A white SUV with tinted windows pulled into my drive. Didn't look like a neighbor's car, county plates. When the door opened, a tall man in a gray suit stepped out. Late 40s, polished shoes, and a briefcase that looked too expensive for the county's budget. Preston Garrison, he asked, squinting in the morning sun. That's me. He approached with a card between two fingers. I'm Assistant District Attorney Mark Elwood. Mind if I ask a few questions? Sure, I said, wiping my hands on a rag. Is this about last night? Not exactly. It's about a pattern of complaints we've been reviewing tied to your HOA. You familiar with a miss? Deborah Alcott. I leaned against a split rail post. Unfortunately. Elwood opened the briefcase, pulled out a file, and flipped it open. She's filed over 70 complaints in the past year, half of them against the same 5 residents. You're one of them. That doesn't surprise me. She's accused you of illegal construction, operating an unlicensed business, zoning violations, and now a public safety threat. I raised an eyebrow. She told dispatch we were dangerous. We got the call transcript. She claimed you were stockpiling weapons and that there was a shootout. I let that hang in the air for a second. At her retirement party, with the mayor and 3 state officers in attendance. She's unhinged, I said plainly. That's what we're starting to suspect, Elwood replied. But it gets more interesting. We pulled HOA financials after a tip from someone on the board. There's a discrepancy. What kind? She's been funneling HOA funds into a private LLC she registered under a different name. The payments are labeled as consulting fees. You're telling me she's skimming from the neighborhood to the tune of $32,000 over the last 14 months. I whistled low. And no one noticed. Most residents don't attend the finance meetings. She uses vague language and buries the expenses in line items. I crossed my arms. So what now? We're building a case. I need statements, evidence, anything showing she's misusing authority or retaliating against residents. I nodded. You'll want to talk to Bill and Sharon down the hill. She got their shed torn down over a color swatch, already on our list. But I wanted to start here. You have security footage. I've got a full perimeter system and backup drives. Keep it secure. We'll issue a subpoena if needed, but unofficially I'd like to review it. Happy to help. He paused, then added, one more thing. Did she ever mention a company called Pinebrook Solutions? I frowned. No, why? That's the LLC. And she's been billing them for everything from landscaping to legal counsel. But there's no record of the company outside of a P.O. box at the FedEx on Main Street. That explained a lot. Deborah had always pushed for exclusive contracts with vendors no one had heard of. Overpriced lawn services, bizarre pest control companies, even a failed neighborhood website that never worked. As Elwood packed up, he said, if she contacts you again, document everything. Don't engage directly. We'll keep you updated. After he left, I went inside, pulled my external drive from the safe and started cataloging files. The footage from last night was gold. Not just her confrontation, but the moment deputies arrived and realized it was all fabricated. I marked the timestamps and made copies. By noon, I'd heard from 2 neighbors already. Word was spreading fast. Deborah had been released early that morning, but not before she'd spent 4 hours in a holding room and had her phone confiscated for evidence. Apparently, she'd tried to delete messages after realizing the call to dispatch had been recorded. Then I got a knock. It was Sharon, holding a binder thicker than a phone book. She's been after us for 8 months, she said, stepping into the kitchen. We started documenting everything after she fined us for planting lavender instead of rosemary. I opened the binder. Inside were photos, letters, emails, even copies of bank statements showing odd charges to the HOA fund. She had us pay a $300 resodding fee, Sharon said. But the landscaper never showed. When we asked for proof of the work, she threatened a lien. Did you report it? Who? The board's stacked with her friends. One guy works with her cousin's husband. I added her materials to my growing pile. We agreed on a plan: gather evidence, coordinate with the HOA, and let the legal system take the lead. But that afternoon, Deborah made her next move. A certified letter showed up at my cabin. Inside was a cease and desist order signed not by a lawyer, but by the HOA board, accusing me of hosting paramilitary events and giving me 14 days to cease unlawful use of property. I let out a laugh, almost spilling my coffee. The paper wasn't even on legal letterhead. Just a Word document with a Pinebrook Ridge logo pasted at the top. I scanned it and sent it straight to Elwood. He replied within the hour. This helps. Keep it coming. The next day, things escalated again. I woke to find a bright orange notice taped to my front gate. Immediate action required, code infraction in bold letters. Someone had spray painted a red X on my mailbox. But the kicker, the notice was signed by a Pinebrook compliance officer. No name, no badge number, no contact info. I checked the community bylaws. There's no such position. I called Deputy Kyle. He showed up 30 minutes later, took one look at the notice and said, "That's not legal. That's impersonating a civic authority." We checked the footage. Sure enough, at 4:43 a.m., Deborah herself crept up in a hoodie and stuck the notice on my gate. She even looked around before spray painting the X. Kyle took a copy of the video and radioed it in. This crosses the line from harassment to criminal misrepresentation. By that evening, an official warrant had been issued for the seizure of HOA financial records. The county sent 2 auditors and a sheriff's deputy to the HOA office, which was just a converted room in Deborah's house. She refused to let them in. They called in another deputy. When she still refused, they came back with a locksmith. The board members started turning on her that night. One posted anonymously on the community forum until Deborah tried to shut it down by claiming it violated the HOA's media policy. Too late. Screenshots flew faster than wildfire. Residents began sharing stories, fines for made-up violations, threats of liens, fake legal warnings. In less than 48 hours, the neighborhood went from scared silence to open revolt. Someone printed flyers. Had enough. Meet at the community center Friday night. I showed up early. By 7, the place was packed, standing room only. Even the mayor's assistant attended, taking notes quietly in the back. A man I didn't recognize stood and spoke. "I'm James Collier. I live on Birch Hollow. Last year, Deborah fined me for putting up a little free library, said it was an unauthorized structure. I filed an appeal." Never heard back. An elderly woman stood next. She ordered my son's truck towed, said it was abandoned. He was visiting from college. One by one, they told their stories. When I stood, I didn't even have to say much. I've got 5 hours of security footage, 3 fake notices, and a forged cease and desist. Applause erupted. Then Bill, one of the residents who'd been silent until now, stood up and dropped a bombshell. "I used to be HOA treasurer. I resigned after she made me sign blank checks. When I asked questions, she accused me of misconduct and pushed me out." Silence. He held up a thumb drive. I kept copies. The next morning, Deborah's house was surrounded by unmarked cars. Investigators rolled boxes of files into vans. She'd been served with a court summons, pending charges for fraud, falsification of legal documents, and misuse of emergency services. And me, I sat on my porch with a cold drink, watching her walk out in cuffs. The following Monday, I was in my workshop sanding down a set of reclaimed oak beams when my phone buzzed on the bench. Unknown number, local area code. I wiped my hands on my apron before picking up. "This is Preston. Mr. Garrison, this is Special Agent Laura Pike with the State Attorney General's office. I'm following up on the events surrounding your HOA president, Deborah Alcott." I straightened up. "Figured someone higher up might get involved eventually. You'd be correct. We've initiated a broader investigation into Pinebrook Ridge's HOA after a series of irregularities flagged by the county DA. I was hoping to review your original permit applications and any correspondence you've had with the board regarding property lines. I pulled the drawer open under my workbench, retrieved a folder stamped with my original zoning documents, and said, "I've got everything from the county office, including the signed surveyor's report and the variance approval." "You want digital copies? That would be ideal. I'll send you a secure upload link." She paused for a moment, then added, "Just so you're aware, this has extended beyond financial misconduct. There's evidence suggesting Miss Alcott has been manipulating property boundaries to justify liens and force property sales." That stopped me cold. "She tried that with me once," I said. "Claimed my east fence was encroaching on HOA-maintained land. I proved it wasn't and she dropped it." "But it sounds like I wasn't the only one. She's filed 8 similar claims in the last 2 years. 3 of those properties were sold under pressure, all to the same holding company." The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. "Let me guess." "Pinebrook Solutions." "That's the one," Agent Pike confirmed. "We traced it to a shell company registered in Delaware. No physical office, no employees. But the mailing address belongs to a law firm that's represented Miss Alcott in unrelated civil matters. So she was trying to force people out and buy them up through a company she controlled. That's our working theory. If it holds, we're looking at fraud, coercion, and potentially racketeering." I exhaled slowly. "You'll have my files by tonight." After we hung up, I walked to the back of the cabin and opened the fireproof safe. Besides the original permits, I had digital backups of every communication I'd received from the HOA, including the time Deborah tried to fine me for installing solar panels, a move I'd gotten pre-approved by the County Energy Board. I uploaded everything and added a note about the surveyor who helped me mark the boundary lines. He'd mentioned at the time that Deborah had tried to challenge his report, which was unusual for an HOA president with no legal stake in zoning. Later that afternoon, I drove into town for lumber and stopped by the coffee shop near the courthouse. As I stepped inside, I ran into Bill from the Finance Committee, holding a manila envelope and looking like he'd aged 10 years in the past week. "You just coming from the DA's office?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. "They wanted copies of the original HOA bylaws. Guess what wasn't in the version Deborah uploaded to the state registry?" I raised an eyebrow. "The clause that requires a minimum of 5 board members for any budgetary vote. She's been pushing through expenses with just 2. That's not just shady, that's illegal under state HOA guidelines." "Exactly. And get this, she edited the digital version of the bylaws last year, used a PDF scrubber to remove the clause." I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I asked, "Any chance the originals still exist?" He nodded. "I've got the hard copies, signed and notarized. I kept them after she tried to rewrite the landscaping policy without a vote." "You're sitting on a landmine, Bill." He looked uncomfortable. I didn't want to believe she was doing more than cutting corners, but this is bigger than I thought. Stay in touch. If you need someone to walk with you into the courtroom, I'm there. That night, a new notice went up on the community bulletin board. It wasn't from Deborah. It was from the interim board, hastily assembled after her arrest. They were calling for a full audit and an emergency vote to restructure the HOA leadership. I noticed something odd at the bottom of the flyer, a small disclaimer that all voting rights would be verified against property ownership status. That was new and suspicious. The next morning, I called Agent Pike again. "That disclaimer at the bottom of the flyer, can someone lose their voting rights if their property is under conflict?" She didn't hesitate. "Yes. If an HOA files a lien or questions the validity of a deed, they can suspend voting privileges pending resolution." Why? I think Deborah rigged the system. If she filed bogus claims against properties, she could strip residents of their vote and pass whatever she wanted. That aligns with what we're seeing. We've found records of suspended votes for 3 properties in the last election cycle. All 3 owners had submitted complaints about misuse of funds. I stared out the window at the trees swaying in the breeze. She didn't just abuse power, she silenced opposition. "Mr. Garrison, would you be willing to testify if this goes to trial?" "I'd be honored." 2 days later, subpoenas were issued for 2 more former board members. One flipped almost immediately, providing emails that confirmed Deborah had instructed them to ignore vote requirements and approve expenditures without documentation. It didn't stop there. A whistleblower from the property appraisal office came forward, revealing that Deborah had submitted altered photos and falsified reports to lower the appraised value of certain homes. All of them were later bought by Pinebrook Solutions. The state ag's office moved fast. A judge issued an injunction freezing the HOA's accounts, and a temporary administrator was installed to oversee community operations. Deborah's assets were frozen, her passport revoked, and a grand jury indictment was scheduled. Meanwhile, the neighborhood began to breathe again. People who'd been afraid to speak up started sharing stories. Someone painted over the fake red X's Deborah had marked on various properties. A young couple that had been threatened with eviction for having a backyard swing set hosted a block party, and me. I got a call from the mayor's office. "We'd like to formally recognize your role in exposing corruption in Pinebrook Ridge," said the assistant. "Would you be willing to speak at the next town council meeting?" I agreed, but only if I could bring the others who'd stood up too. Sharon, Bill, the couple from Birch Hollow. I wasn't the only one who'd fought back. At the meeting, I stood at the podium in front of a packed room. "This wasn't just about one person abusing power," I said. "It was about a system built on silence, on fear. On rules no one questioned because they were written in fine print and backed by bluster. But all it took was a few people standing up and saying, 'That's not right,' to bring the whole thing down." Afterward, as I walked back to my truck, I found a note tucked under the windshield wiper. Handwritten, no signature. "Thank you for giving us our neighborhood back." I watched the sun set behind the pines, the sky streaked with amber and rose, and realized something I hadn't before. It wasn't the party that had made Deborah snap. It was the fact that we'd gathered without her permission, that we'd celebrated without her control. She couldn't stand the idea of people being free under her watch, and that, in the end, had been her undoing, not the money, not the lies, not even the crimes. Just good people refusing to live afraid. 3 weeks after Deborah Alcott was led out of her home in handcuffs, Pinebrook Ridge looked like a different place. The clipped, artificial order she'd enforced had given way to something better: neighbors chatting across fences, kids actually playing in front yards without someone snapping photos for rule violations, and porch lights glowing long after dusk without incident reports. But the real change wasn't just in the mood, it was in the paperwork. The state-appointed administrator, a no-nonsense woman named Carla Wexley with a background in municipal oversight, had taken over HOA operations temporarily. Carla wasn't interested in playing politics. She was there to audit, clean house, and hand off a functioning, legal HOA to the community. I'd been at the community center 3 times that week, helping review the architectural requests Deborah had let pile up for nearly a year. She used to reject them without explanation, sometimes without even opening the envelopes. Carla was determined to clear the backlog, which gave me a front-row seat to the mess Deborah left behind. On Thursday morning, Carla waved me into the office. Her sleeves were rolled to the elbow, and her desk was covered in spreadsheets and file folders. "Preston, take a look at this," she said, sliding a manila folder toward me. I opened it and frowned. Inside were copies of 3 property transfer forms, each bearing forged signatures, and dated within the last 6 months. The names on the seller lines were familiar: 2 elderly residents, and one who'd moved out abruptly without explanation. All 3 properties had been acquired by Pinebrook Solutions. "These aren't just shady," I said. "They're fabricated," Carla nodded grimly. "The notary stamp used on them doesn't match any licensed notary in the state." We've confirmed the elderly couple still lived in their home weeks after these were filed. They had no idea the home was transferred until they received eviction notices from a shell company attorney. I gripped the edge of the table. "That's grand theft." "Worse," she said. "It's elder fraud." And we found 5 more pending transfers waiting in the queue, unsigned, all targeting properties with high equity and absentee owners. Deborah was using HOA violations as leverage, threatening liens, and then transferring the deeds when owners failed to respond or moved out. She was stealing houses. She was building a real estate portfolio under a dummy company, funded by HOA dues and enforced through threats. I leaned back slowly. How far up does this go? We're still tracing the LLC's payment routes, but the state AG has already expanded the charges. She's facing multiple felony counts now, including real estate fraud, wire fraud, and exploitation of vulnerable adults. What about the board? The ones who signed off on her motions. They've been subpoenaed. 2 have turned over emails that show she was doctoring vote tallies and holding unofficial meetings at her house. One of them admitted they only stayed on the board because she threatened to file conduct violations against their teenage son if they quit. I exhaled. That tracks. Carla closed the folder. We're holding a town hall Saturday. I want you to speak again. The residents trust you. You helped break this case open. I hesitated. Only if we're talking about real reform, no more secret boards, no more rubber stamps. That's the plan. When Saturday rolled around, the community center was packed tighter than before. But this time, the room felt ready to move forward. Carla stood at the front, flanked by a county official and a representative from the AG's office. Behind them, a projector displayed a simple agenda: restoration and reform. When I took my place at the podium, I didn't speak right away. I looked over the faces in the crowd, people I'd seen walk their dogs, rake leaves, shovel driveways, people who'd been afraid to hang a wind chime or plant sunflowers. This isn't just about Deborah, I began. This is about what happens when power goes unchecked. When someone turns a neighborhood into a kingdom and no one thinks they can stop it. I let that sink in before continuing. We had our homes invaded quietly on paper, through threats, lies, and fake signatures. But we fought back, with evidence, with law, and most importantly, with each other. That's how we take this place back for good. When I stepped down, the applause wasn't just approval, it was relief, catharsis, hope. The AG rep stepped up next. We are formally charging Deborah Alcott with 17 counts, including fraud, forgery, elder abuse, and conspiracy to commit real estate theft. Her trial will begin next month. We've frozen all Pinebrook Solutions assets and are working to return the stolen properties to their rightful owners. The room erupted again, but this time in cheers. After the meeting, I stepped outside for some air. The sky was overcast, but the air was warm. A few neighbors lingered on the lawn, catching up like old friends. Kids rode scooters down the sidewalk without anyone snapping photos or writing them up. Carla joined me on the steps, sipping from a dented thermos. You ever think about running for the new board? Not my style, I said. But I'll help build it. We've got a candidate list forming. This time everyone votes, no suspensions, no secret ballots. Good, keep it that way, she paused. There's one more thing, the cabin your place, it's become kind of a symbol. You stood your ground, that matters. I chuckled. It's just timber and stone. Maybe. But it's also where the sheriff's retirement party happened, where the first cracks showed in Deborah's armor, where she realized she couldn't scare everyone. I looked out at the trees. Funny thing is, she never understood what scared people in the first place. It wasn't the fines or the threats. It was the feeling that no one would listen, that no one would help. Carla nodded. Well, they know better now. A week later, the court returned control of Pinebrook Ridge to the newly formed Transitional Board. The announcement came with a package of reforms: independent audits, public meetings, term limits, and a hotline for residents to report misconduct directly to the county. Deborah sat behind bars, denied bail after prosecutors showed evidence she'd tried to wire money to an offshore account. Her shell company had collapsed under scrutiny, and her name was fast becoming a cautionary tale in HOA law seminars across the state. As for me, I went back to woodworking. The cabin got a fresh coat of stain. The fence, still exactly where the county said it belonged, stood firm. Neighbors dropped by more often now, not for complaints, but to ask questions, share stories, or just say thanks. One evening, I found a small package on my front porch. Inside was a carved cedar plaque with the words, "This is what accountability looks like, no name, just the message." I hung it over the workshop door because this wasn't just my win. It belonged to every resident who stopped being afraid, to the couple who refused to sell, to the retired teacher who documented every fake violation, to the teenager who built a website tracking board transparency, to the deputy who chose the truth over politics, to the former treasurer who kept the real bylaws, and to a sheriff who just wanted a peaceful send-off and accidentally lit the match that burned the whole crooked system down. Pinebrook Ridge didn't get better because we waited for someone else to fix it. It got better because we stood up together and said, "Enough."